Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber, the Gigacity Company, fiber internet, HD, and digital IPTV in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Maller Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis, lawmg.com. The IU School of Education, preparing teachers, scholars, and administrators to improve teaching in Indiana and around the world. education.indiana.edu. IU Alumni Association, connecting IU's network of alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, advocacy, and volunteerism. alumni.iu.edu. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk. After another act of vandalism at an Indiana church, the governor says it's time to pass a hate crimes law.
They expressed hatred. What they triggered was an outpouring of love.
But if the past helps predict what will happen, hate crimes legislation won't be an easy sell at the Statehouse. China isn't taking our plastics anymore. That has cities across the country grappling with their recycling. Coming up, what some Indiana cities are doing to keep recyclables from filling up landfills. And one of the largest employers in Mike Pence's hometown of Columbus says it stands to lose millions if the Trump administration's trade war with China continues.
It's critical to our company, and it's been the single biggest driver of growth for our company over the past decade.
Ahead, we visit the engine manufacturer Cummins for a conversation about trade. Those stories, plus the latest news headlines from across the state, right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren. The governor says he will support a hate crimes bill in the upcoming legislative session. Indiana is one of 5 states without such a law. Some legislators have tried for years to get something passed, but their efforts have always failed. The governor's support comes after a Carmel synagogue was vandalized over the weekend. Someone spray-painted Nazi symbols on a wall at the Sha'arei Tefillah synagogue in Carmel Saturday. Officials, including Carmel's mayor, the governor, Senator Donnelly, and Vice President Mike Pence, immediately condemned the vandalism. On Monday, hundreds of people packed into the synagogue to show their support for the congregation.
They tried to commit an act of hatred. They expressed hatred. What they triggered was an outpouring of love.
A number of groups spoke at the event from a variety of religious backgrounds. Folks from the Muslim Alliance of Indiana, the Hindu Temple of Central Indiana, the Indianapolis Urban League, and Indy Pride.
PFLAG stands with the Indianapolis Jewish community to denounce this recent act of hatred and cowardice.
Congregation member Sanford Horn says, although he was disappointed by the hate crime, he believes the community support stems from true Hoosier hospitality.
The cadre, an outpouring of support from all walks of life in this community does not surprise me.
A number of the speakers urged state lawmakers to pass a hate crimes bill. There's a reward being offered for information that leads to an arrest in the case. If Indiana had a hate crimes law, the suspect could potentially face a harsher sentence. Now, Indiana does have a bias crimes law that requires police departments to report bias crimes. Only a handful actually do, though. That's because there's no reason for police to investigate the motivation behind a crime, because you can't be charged with a hate crime in Indiana. Senator Greg Taylor has worked for several years to pass a clearly defined hate crimes law in Indiana. He joins us now from Indianapolis. Senator, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So we have some data from the Anti-Defamation League's annual report that shows anti-Semitic incidents increased 57% from about 2016 to 2017. Now, there's no way to know if numbers are increasing that much in Indiana, but do you get the sense that there are more hate crimes occurring?
Absolutely. As you indicated in the introduction, there in Indiana, we require law enforcement agencies across the state of Indiana to actually report these biased crimes. Of the over 300 law enforcement agencies in the state of Indiana, only approximately 14 have reported anything to the Indiana State Police Repository. That number, totaling approximately 78 incidences, could be multiplied by a number of times in the state of Indiana. So we can't say in Indiana that it doesn't happen.
So a number of business leaders got together this week to call for hate crimes legislation. Governor Holcomb indicated that he would likely sign it if it comes across his desk. So does this seem like the moment that we can kind of catch up with the other 45 states that have some hate crime laws in place?
I really hope so. What's actually discouraging, however, is I've been in this position for several years now. As you know, last year there was an incident in North Carolina where a young lady was killed by some people who didn't agree with her same sentiments and ran her over. And I heard dialogue, the same dialogue that I'm hearing today, last year. During the legislative session, the chairman of the committee decided at that time, once we had testimony from several individuals, including a brave mother from Fort Wayne, come down and talk about her son being beaten by some kids based on the fact that he was African American. And the chairman of the committee decided after all that testimony not to take a vote. So if I have to go on history on what I think today, I'm optimistic, but I'm also pessimistic because I've heard this type of dialogue for a long time.
Right. Well, we'll have to leave it there for now. Of course, something we'll be following this coming year. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
The Environmental Protection Agency was ready to ban some uses of the cancer-causing chemical TCE. But last year, EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt put that effort on hold. As Rebecca Thiel reports, parents concerned about rare child cancers in Franklin say the ban needs to move forward.
Carrie Reinhardt lost her daughter Emma Grace to a rare brain tumor 4 years ago. She's part of the group If It Was Your Child, which worked with the Edison Wetlands Association to test homes near the Amphenol industrial site in Franklin. Some had high levels of TCE, a chemical used to degrease metal and make other chemicals, like refrigerants. The group suspects it's one of several pollutants that may be causing rare blood and brain cancers in the area. Reinhardt says this partial ban on TCE can't wait.
It could be 10 years. It's when they decide to come back around to it, not based on any set time frame, so we would like to encourage them to come back around to it sooner.
Stacy Davidson's stepson Zane was diagnosed with a rare form of leukemia 3 years ago and is now in remission. She says TCE and similar chemicals could be responsible for these rare diseases in Franklin.
It is a known carcinogen, and if we don't do that now, it could take up to 5 years for us to come around again to get it banned again.
The Indiana State Department of Health investigated the Franklin area 3 years ago, but determined there was no cancer cluster. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Rebecca Thiel.
Both moms were in Washington, D.C. this week, where they worked with representatives to urge the EPA to ban TCE. Now for headlines, we go over to Barbara Brozier, who has the latest on this week's top stories.
Thanks, Joe. Home building sales are down dramatically from this time last year. The state's Builders Association blames tariffs. Indiana had nearly 1,500 single-family permits in June, but that's a 10% decrease from May and an 8% drop from this time last year. A 20% tariff on imported Canadian lumber has driven up the price of an average new single-family home by more than $6,000 compared to last year. A vote on whether Vigo County is going to move forward with a tax hike to fund a new jail could happen in the next couple of weeks. County leaders heard more than 3 hours of testimony this week during a public meeting. The majority of residents say they oppose the construction of a $66 million jail and the proposed tax increase to fund it.
Lines at the Annex building extended out the door as one by one, people got up to give their opinion about the jail proposal.
We want to
see the community thrive, and thriving is not through jails.
The meeting comes after the county conducted a feasibility study to evaluate the recommended size of the proposed facility. It calls for a 527-bed jail, staffed by more than 80 people. The majority of residents who spoke opposed the project.
If we build a mega jail and tax ourselves to build a mega jail, is there going to be money left for high school? So what's more important? Prison, schools, kids, inmates.
County commissioners are proposing an income tax increase of 0.75 cents to fund the project. Vigo County is facing a federal lawsuit related to jail overcrowding. It's already gotten 2 extensions for responding to the suit.
We have to deal with that issue before the court is going to take the pressure off of us and allow the process to move through its natural course.
The county council will vote on the proposal at its August 14th meeting.
And legal counsel for the Vigo County inmates has filed a request for summary judgment in the lawsuit. Vigo County has until August 17th, just 3 days after the county meeting, to respond to that request. After that, the judge will decide whether to move forward with a trial or deliver a ruling. The state is accepting applications from Hoosiers who need help catching up on their mortgage payments. The Hardest Hit Fund provides up to $30,000 for those who either lost their jobs or had wages cut. The state closed the program a year ago because it couldn't guarantee it could serve new applicants. Now it's reopening it until all funds are spent. More than 10,000 homeowners statewide have taken advantage of the program. Bloomington officials say they plan to use the current Indiana University Health Hospital site to meet the city's growing demands. The hospital site reutilization steering committee met this week to discuss the first draft of a report from a consulting firm on potential developments. The meeting included discussions about bringing affordable housing to the area. Bloomington Deputy Mayor Mick Reniason says there's a big demand for residential properties.
We're talking about a spectrum of affordability that's all the way from people whose income is below poverty level or at poverty level, all the way through folks who are CEOs of companies. And even some of those folks want to live downtown, and we don't have very much housing product other than student housing in the downtown area.
The city purchased the hospital site this year for $6.5 million. Bloomington will receive the land after IU Health moves to a combined hospital and academic building in 2021. Demolition is scheduled to start in 2022. Greencastle residents are worried about a proposal to bring a new medical detox facility to their community. It would be within half a mile of a school and a former assisted living facility. The Indiana Center for Recovery already has a facility in Bloomington and held a public forum this week for residents who say they're concerned about their property values and their children's safety. Company officials also tried to distance themselves from zoning issues they're facing in Bloomington.
The Bloomington issue was a stark contrast to what we're dealing with here. We were looking at a facility that was not a medical facility preceding us applying with a BZA, whereas here we were taking a residential quasi-medical facility that was an assisted living facility to convert that into an inpatient residential detox.
The Board of Zoning Appeals is set to meet next week. If approved, the center hopes to open in the fall. And Joe, of course, will be following developments with the center in Greencastle and the ongoing zoning dispute here in Bloomington as they move forward.
Of course. Thanks so much, Barbara. Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk. China is no longer accepting U.S. recycling. That's thrown cities across the country into chaos, including some here in Indiana, as they try to figure out what to do with their waste. And for some, it feels like the allergy season is never coming to an end. We'll visit the Bloomington Salt Cave, which owners say could help those in need of relief. These stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
The WTIU WFIU news team connects Indiana to the world. We bring you the top news of the day on radio, TV, and online. We round up the stories that have people talking each week and dig deep into the issues that affect your community the most. The WTIU WFIU news team is where you are and telling your story.
10,000.
15? 15, you think?
20, 21,000?
600.
20. 18.5.
24.
It's at least 40.
Look at it.
4,500,000.
650.
20.
650.
This textile would be worth about $500,000.
$500,000?
No way.
I knew it. It's just a blanket.
Laying on the back of a chair. Well, sir, you have a national treasure.
Wow.
A national treasure. Congratulations.
I can't believe this.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. China isn't going to take trash from the U.S. anymore. Last year, the country announced it will no longer import America's contaminated recycling. And with nowhere to go, the question is what becomes of all that material? As Rebecca Thiel reports, people in Indiana are searching for ways to prevent potential recyclables from ending up in a landfill.
For some folks in rural Johnson County, these drop-off bins were the only way they could recycle. But today, they're not there anymore. The county discontinued them July 31st. The recycling district couldn't afford to pay haulers to take them. Executive Director Jesse Bigerman says no one supervised the bins, so the recycling often got contaminated with things like greasy pizza boxes. Now that China won't take low-quality recycling, Bigerman says the material in bins like these isn't valuable anymore. And if no one wants it,
then unfortunately, those items will sit idle. And at some point, they will find their way either contaminating, the environment around them or going back into a landfill.
Few recycling districts have had to stop service, but others have decided that, like China, they simply can't accept some items anymore. Greene County stopped taking glass, and Monroe County won't recycle plastic bags and shrink wrap. Eliza Pokrell is the community outreach coordinator for the Monroe County Solid Waste District.
There's too much, okay, and the recyclers who handle that do not want to deal with it because they don't have any place for it, and we don't have a vendor for it.
While the value of U.S. recycling is low, the cost to process it has gone up. And that cost gets passed down to Hoosiers. Brownstown only had to increase its rates by 50 cents a month. But Clerk Treasurer David Willey says the town just raised them 2 years ago to get larger recycle bins.
The time before we went to the carts, a lot of people, didn't like that big of an increase.
Some of Indiana's recycling gets sorted here at Rumpke's Material Recovery Facility in Cincinnati, Ohio. Steve Sargent is the company's director of recycling. He says China's standards are much stricter than what the U.S. recycling industry is used to. No more than 0.5% of the material can be contaminated.
Can our industry hit that on a consistent basis? No, we can't.
So what's the solution? Sargent says U.S. consumers need to start treating recyclables less like trash and more like what they are, products. Take cardboard, for example. By itself, recycled cardboard is very valuable, especially with the rise of companies like Amazon. But Sargent says when that cardboard gets jumbled together with other things, it becomes dirt cheap mixed paper.
The value of mixed paper today on the index, which we sell against, is 0. Now, you can't make much money when you're selling 30% of your mix in a recycling plant at 0.
Sargent says he gets it. People want to recycle as much as they can. But when folks throw the wrong items in the bin, they risk sending more recyclables to the landfill. Sargent says the industry needs to find a better way to teach people what's recyclable and what's not.
A very basic message. So we want plastic bottles and jugs, small mouth, large body. We don't want tubs, we don't want butter dishes, we don't want all this food packaging waste. That's the material that's been contaminating us.
And if Hoosiers can manage to keep their recyclables clean, there may be a silver lining here. Allison Mitchell is the executive director of the Indiana Recycling Coalition. She says with some improvements, Indiana could process this excess recycling right here. The issue then would become making sure there are markets that want it.
One really easy way to do that is support and purchase from manufacturers who use recycled content in their products.
Sargent says adapting to the China ban won't be cheap, but that Rumpke has invested too much not to give it a shot. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Rebecca Thiel.
Experts say single-stream recycling, where people put all types of recycling in one bin, can further contaminate the load. The Johnson County Recycling District has considered switching back to dual-stream recycling, where paper and cardboard are separated from other recyclables. Indiana-based engine manufacturer Cummins reached a quarterly revenue record this week of $6.1 billion. But the company's 2018 earnings are expected to be lower than predicted because of what the company says are about $100 million in expenses associated with trade tariffs and increased commodity costs. In a New York Times opinion piece, the CEO of Cummins wrote that what's at stake is not just the company's profits, but jobs in Seymour and other communities where we work. Barbara Brosier sat down with the Director of External Communications for Cummins to learn more about how that could impact employees and consumers.
Tell me a little bit about how big of a deal exports are for a company like Cummins.
Well, it's a huge deal for our company. You know, we export between 2.5 and 3 billion annually from our plants here in the United States, and you know that involves you know, plants in Columbus, it's plants in Seymour, Indiana. Seymour's a plant where we do high horsepower equipment, mostly for our power systems business, and up to 80% of those products are exported to global markets. So, you know, trade is of huge importance to it. It's critical to our company, and it's been the, you know, single biggest driver of growth for our company over the past decade.
Can you talk about how tariffs then, you mentioned keeping costs down. I'm sure that's making it especially tricky to do at this time.
Sure, it's a significant concern to us. We're looking at a pretty sizable impact, you know, even just over the course of the rest of this year. So if they continue to escalate, if more tariffs are implemented, if we get closer to really entering a you know, full-scale trade war, that's not going to just impact Cummins, it's going to impact our suppliers, our customers, and really, you know, when you look at what the tariffs are at the very, you know, basic level, it's a tax, and that tax will get passed down inevitably.
You mentioned the high dollar impact that these tariffs could have on Cummins just this year. What does that mean for the company's future?
We're in a good place right now as a company, but this is a significant headwind that we're looking at, and we need to continue to work to you know, hopefully reverse this so it doesn't affect companies and businesses and American workers.
If not tariffs, what are some of the other ways that Cummins would like to see the government attempt to deal with, you know, a trade partner like China?
What we would like to see is not an approach that is a unilateral tariff, but instead let's have these, you know, negotiations with our trading partners. We understand there are things that need to change in some of these trade agreements, and we need to make them stronger. In some cases, we need to modernize them. We need, you know, better access, equal access. What we find is free trade agreements help us thrive and help American businesses thrive. So the closer we can get to level playing field with these trading partners, we feel like we can succeed and win in the marketplace.
Cummins was also in the news this week because of a recall. The company is recalling 500,000 trucks because of faulty pollution controls. A defective engine part is causing dirtier exhaust than U.S. standards allow. The trucks range from big pickups to utility trucks to big rigs manufactured between 2010 and 2015. A Bloomington business could provide allergy sufferers an alternative to over-the-counter medications. What's known as halo therapy is offered at Bloomington's new salt cave. As Lindsay Wright reports, the practice started in Europe in the 1800s.
From the moment you step inside this room, it's hard not to feel your mood shift.
I think the majority of people feel very relaxed when they get out of there, and that they could breathe, you know, so much better. They were congested, or you know, they just didn't feel good. It's excellent for jet lag.
Here's how the cave works. A generator crushes pure sodium chloride, which then blows into the room. There's about 4 tons of pink Himalayan salt in this cave. You kick your shoes off at the door, walk in, grab a seat, and breathe it in for about 45 minutes.
Just breathing the salt-infused air is excellent. It reduces inflammation in your respiratory system. It encounters allergens, pollutions, and things like that the salt bonds with.
Chaikin opened the salt cave just a year ago. Her goal is to help those in need of a relaxing experience, but she also wants it to be a community space.
It's excellent multi-generational time because the kids love to play in the salt pebble floor, and it's excellent for people of all ages, really.
According to the American Lung Association, salt therapy could provide relief for some obstructive lung diseases, but there are no evidence-based findings to create guidelines for treatment. The organization says people should talk with their doctors before relying on alternative therapies. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Lindsay Wright.
And the Indiana State Fair is underway. The opening ceremony was this morning. The theme this year is Step Right Up. It's a tribute to the state's rich circus history. Fairgoers can check out a free circus history exhibit this year, which features the world's largest circus bandwagon.
It's 29 feet long. It is 8 feet wide at the 2 points where the hemisphere is. And it is 13,000 pounds.
And that's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber, the Gigacity Company, fiber internet, HD and digital IPTV in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Mallard Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis, lawmg.com. The IU School of Education, preparing teachers, scholars, and administrators to improve teaching in Indiana and around the world. education.indiana.edu. IU Alumni Association, connecting IU's network of alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, advocacy, and volunteerism. alumni.iu.edu. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.